Well, we began with this development back just after we reformed in the late 1990s. And our purpose was to try and assist in the bringing in of European law and helping people understand what changes that would bring in nature conservation. And the first thing we were faced with was a special area of conservation of 250 hectares, which was reduced to 50 hectares, and a golf course was given permission for it. And that was the finest sand dune system on the Clare coast at the time. And it also turned out to host a very rare snail, Vertigo Angustior. And this rare snail became the subject of a court case, which we took to protect it. And we got a court order guaranteeing us that the snail will be protected and that will be maintained and improved. But that was fine. And the court appointed a conservationist, Dr. Morkins, who had written the book for the National Parks and Wildlife Service on the snail. And the plans were put in place, grazing regimes, drainage, all the things that were necessary. And by 2014, when Donald Trump bought the course, there were well over 1 million snails. And it was the biggest stronghold of those snails here in Ireland. But over the years since then, things have not gone so well. Now, we used to get the conservation management reports, annual reports. But once Trump took over, the supply of annual reports ceased, and we couldn't get them anymore. So we didn't know what was happening. And that's one of the problems when this case came up again, and there was more to look at. Well, when we finally got the records, and we did get extensive records in the end, it turned out that what had happened was Trump sacked the specialist, Dr. Morkins, sacked the farmer who had been undergoing very careful grazing and feeding, sacked all the ground staff, and brought a load of people in from Scotland. And they simply just dropped the conservation measures. One of them, for instance, is that you have to use a strimmer on a lot of the ground, because the snail although it needs some low ground, it also has to have kind of tall, leafy grasses around it to keep it cool and keep the temperature right. And they just stopped doing that. And National Parks and Wildlife said, well, why are you stopping? And they said, oh, well, it wasn't, the conservation measures weren't working.
Indeed. And you've been critical of management there, Tony. Is it the case that even if planning permission is granted for a development at Trump Doonbeg under particular conditions involving the monitoring of, say, the snail population, that you can't have faith in that because management can't be trusted to follow through on that commitment?
Yes, and actually under European law, it's really very clear that if you have mitigation measures, measures that are supposed to help correct whatever necessary errors you might have, if you have these kind of mitigation measures, or if you're doing any of that work under the Habitats Directive, it has to be publicly known. It has to be available for the public to comment on it. We're also a member of something called the AHAS Directive, which requires that environmental information must be made public. Now, what will happen is these developers who have presided and using the same consultants over the demise and terminal decline of the snail, and who said it hasn't got anything to do with them, are going to turn in these plans. And we are very much afraid that because of the kind of geopolitical situations, they will be improperly scrutinized, and we won't have a chance to look at them. And if we have to go and try and get them and go through them, we'd have to go to the courts. And we don't want to go to the courts. The whole purpose is to sort things out so that you don't have to go to the courts in order to get protection for rare species.
Tony, Clare County Council granted planning permission for this development last month. Was it wrong to do so?
I don't think so. I think this is where we found that what they'd done is they'd taken on board what we put in a 20-page submission. And they took on board our two main points, which were that the drainage system wasn't properly analyzed. There's actually an OPW, Office of Public Works, drainage system in that area. And then there's a developer's drainage system. And the relationship between the two were never made clear at all, even though they're both on the same piece of ground, and they should have been worked out together. And the actual flow goes through the dunes, some of which are still protected, and into the bay, which is protected, and that's not being monitored. So when we saw them saying, right, we'll have they'll do the drainage plan, and then they'll do a new management plan in order to ensure that the snail thrives. But the more we looked at it, it's puzzled. We thought, how is this going to work? They've told us they can't do anything. Their consultants have said to us, nothing to do with us. It's erosion. It's this. It's that. And so we felt that if we could enforce this Habitats Directive requirements and the Our House requirements, then there would be a period of time when we could comment on it and we could get down to it and see whether our experts actually thought this was going to work and save the snail, or if it was just more greenwashing.
Mm-hmm. You'll be aware, Tony, that there's an objection in at the moment from an individual in County Longford to these plans, to the decision by Clare County Council to grant planning permission for this. And this often, I think it touches on a point that's raised by individuals quite a lot. The practice of objecting to planning applications from people who mightn't be in the same area as the development, and the argument is made, and indeed the government has spoken on this recently, the argument is made that somebody outside of the area of a development shouldn't have the right to object when they themselves aren't directly affected by it. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think that's the rule for taking a high court case. You have to be directly affected by it, or you don't get a chance to have your case heard. But we're talking here about planning, about nature conservation, about an environment that we all share, we all rely on. We need water, we need clean air. And for that reason, there are a lot of regulations and restrictions in place when you make developments. I kind of feel that this argument, and I know the argument, it's been around for many years, is a bit of a red herring. What we want to do is look at the arguments of whoever it is, not where they come from or the color of their skin or anything else. It's irrelevant. We were very careful in our submissions on this golf course, this Trump golf course, never to actually even name the developer. It's just the developer, because you really shouldn't be affected by whoever owns the site. It'd be crazy just to say, oh, Charlie Hoy owns this, so we'll give him permission.
Yeah.
That's not the way it's supposed to work.
I think that brings us on to another important point, Tony, because whenever there has been a story about Trump Doonbeg in recent years, particularly since 2016, and somebody has spoken against the development or some aspect of the property there's been an argument by people who perhaps would be more loyal to the US president that this is another example of Trump derangement syndrome, quote unquote. Is this purely about the environment, or is there an element of anti-Trumpism to it?
No, this is because our heart and soul is in behind that snail. It was our first big case in the High Court, and although we didn't stop the golf course, we were desperately unhappy, obviously. We had this court order protecting the snail, and we had a letter of comfort from the minister and from the owners guaranteeing us that they would do this. And that's the reason we're making this objection. It's got nothing to do with who owns it at all.
Okay. And just finally then, Tony, what's the next step for the Friends of the Irish Environment? Is it going to go to the courts if they're not satisfied with how An Comisiún Pleanála deals with it?
I think that would be a possible outcome, but I hope it's not the probable outcome. What I hope is the Commission will look at it and understand and abide by these European directives and the Our House agreement, and provide people a period to comment and see whether they think these plans will work or not. The last place you want to end up is in the High Court.